Our next speaker is Jamie Lee Hamilton. Jamie Lee Hamilton draws upon more than 40 years of service in trans communities as a Canadian politician, as an advocate of Aboriginal people, an advocate for residents of Vancouver's poverty-stricken Downtown Eastside and sex trade workers. When she ran for Vancouver City Council in 1996, she was the first openly transgender person to ever run for a political office in Canada. Jamie Lee currently serves on the board of the Greater Vancouver Native Cultural Society. Jamie Lee Hamilton.
Well, thank you, Dr. DeVore, for aging me. Good morning, everyone. It's very good to be here. I'm from Vancouver, and I'd like to acknowledge that we're on Coast Salish territory, and also saying that I also want all of us to agree that we have to do more for our First Peoples than just acknowledge the territory. My life started out at a very young age. I was 15, and I was taken to the University of British Columbia, which is, had a outpatient department where I was seen for as what is now called gender dysphoria. And I remember, because there was an adult outpatient department there, and I could tell that there were people walking around, and they seemed unusual to me. I was only 15. And I said to my doctor, Dr. William Maurice, "Doctor, am I crazy?" And he said, "No, you're not." And I'm very fortunate that I had a good doctor who sanctioned me with a female identity, and because I hear horror stories, and he encouraged me to explore my life into whatever felt comfortable for me, to continue along that path. And I then began exploring Vancouver. I ran into a group of friends. We were all teenagers, and to this day, we're still in contact with each other. We're all transgender, transsexuals, and we're alive. We came through the AIDS crisis, and I'm very fortunate because I believe connecting and having that support of a community in your formative years keeps you going in life, because it's really hard being who we are. But who we are is who we are. I remember as well, we began, my friends and I, hanging out at a restaurant called The White Lunch. It was down on Granville. There was an emerging gay scene there, and you could imagine 15-year-olds dressing up, and we were quite slutty, and as you can imagine at our young age. And we incurred the wrath of the manager at the White Lunch, and she told us, look, you ladies are far too trashy, and when you learn to behave like real ladies, then you can come back. And that was my first real, I think, activist streak. We went back to this hotel. It was like our rumpus room, and we got dressed up in our sluttiest outfits and hot pink lipstick and tons of black liner, and we marched up to the White Lunch, which was a couple blocks away, and we had agreed that we would line up, it's cafeteria style. They have all these individual pies, and on the count of 3, we would each stick a finger in a piece of pie to show. And we did that. Well, needless to say, that was the end of our White Lunch days. But it was okay, because it was a racist terminology at that time as well. You know, it implied that they had white cooks. And anyways, I gravitated towards the sex trade. At my period of time in life, I believe, and I know Dr. Viviane Namasi also recognizes this, that you couldn't have a trans identity without a sex trade identity. And I say this because the only way that we could get hormones or surgeries or pay to be our flamboyant, wonderful selves is that you needed money. And many of us came from a place in society where we were bullied, we were treated like pariahs, we were outcasts as freaks, and we, I think, really worked hard to try to survive, and how we did it might not be the greatest for some people, but it allowed us to be loved for who we were. And that love, too, yes, came in the form of exchange of sexual services for money. But as I learned in life, that there's no shame in that. We don't need to hang our heads in shame. We did what we needed to do to survive, and survive we did. And I believe it made me a stronger person. At my young age, of course, the medical profession at that time did not want to issue hormones because I was not of legal age. And as soon as I could, around age 22, I decided to go off to St. Paul's Hospital, and I didn't want to go to the family doctor, and it was very frightening, as it was a time I was going to the hospital, and they still had in the clinic part that I was going to, they still had nuns. And I remember, it's Catholic hospital, and I remember sitting there, and there was this one nun, and I thought, oh God, I hope she doesn't call my name, right? And sure enough, she did. And I had read, of course, by this time, the Christine Jorgensen story. And I remember Christine Jorgensen saying to me, it's now or never. And so with that, I found the courage, and I walked up to that counter to the nun, and I explained my situation, how I wanted to start hormones, and I needed a doctor who could facilitate that. And so she listened to me with this very stern look, and she went away, and she said, you know, take a seat, I'll come back. And I thought, oh my God, she's going to call the police, they're going to lock me up, I'm crazy, all that. But that didn't happen. She came back and sent me to a great doctor who was my doctor. I've outlived 3 doctors now in 40 plus years of transitioning. And so the hormones of those early years were probably not the best hormones as well, and we were taking pretty heavy-duty doses. But at that time, I was also working at a club in Vancouver called BJ's Show Bar, and I was an entertainer. And, drag was very big in Vancouver, and it was a cheap form of entertainment for the gay community. So my first slide here, I believe, is me at 22 years of age, working at BJ's. I'm there in the dressing room. And so like I said, that, while I worked there, and it validated my gender expression as well. Imagine getting to dress up like that and be on stage and having an audience that really appreciated you. And to me, that also cemented my gender confirmation. And but I was also still working in the sex trade and part of a group down in the West End. We were called Hookers on Davie, and it was the early 80s, and we were a very vibrant community. And I say we were so vibrant that within a 4-block radius of where we worked, we lived down there as well, but where we worked, there were 4 national banks, and today there are none. So I say that we were quite the economic generator for that West End. And not only that, we started that gay village. We were the people that really invented, I think, queerness. And so anyways, so working on with my friends in the West End, and we encountered different community groups who were very opposed to us being there, and we were fighting back against them. The mayor of Vancouver at that time had just been elected, a progressive mayor, an NDP mayor, and he decided to bring in a street activities bylaw. And that bylaw was patterned after another bylaw in Calgary. And it was later deemed unconstitutional, but not before the first 6 months. The city had collected $28,000 in the first 6 months of its implementation off of sex trade workers. And I wanted to show the next slide, which is I've been working with Dr. Becky Ross. I don't know if some of you have heard of her. She's a great academic. And this is the areas that we worked in the West End. And the community was very together then. We had the fish stroll, and it was an area for women who were born women. And that terminology, by the way, is not derogatory at all. We also had Hustler Row and of course, the tranny stroll. And we were very much a big part, as I mentioned, in the West End. And I think I have another slide here. Yes. So we formed into this group called the Alliance for Safety of Prostitutes, the ASP. And this is Marie Arrington and Sally DeQuadros. And they were freedom fighters. They were straight women, but they were very much part of understanding the fight that we were going through with the state, because at that time they're trying to rid us from our community, our homes, and really, there were feminist lawyers then, there were trade unions, but no one came to our defense. What had happened, the Attorney General had applied for an injunction to rid us of the West End, from the West End. And in 1984, that injunction was granted, which saw the mass eviction of our community. Today, that would never stand. And as someone who was very involved in that fight, but it was very difficult, and sadly, I hate to say that fight was spearheaded by middle-class gay white men that wanted to recreate this emerging gayborhood in their image. And we were far too loud, the trans population, as they saw us. And so we lost our battle, and but we've also created a newsletter called The Organizer. And it allowed us as well to reach out to people from our community and mobilize and grassroots work, and that's from 1983. So you see the trans community too is very front and center of these activist movements, but yet at times we're erased. And so I like to always keep reminding people of this. And so 1984 happened, and off we went. We even had to move from our homes, and that was a very sad time, because prior to 1984, there wasn't any murders of sex workers, but from 1984 on, the violence crept into our community. It was very profound, and people were dying, being murdered. And I was, at that time I went back to school, Capilano University, but I was still very focused on changing life for the betterment of our community. And I also, we had another, this is one of our battles. This is Michelle Haynes. She's carrying that sign that says, "Harcourt is our pimp." And the city really was our pimp. On the one hand, they collected this 28,000 back in 1982, and licensed indoor places, brothels and that, with high licensing fees. But then they also were in a path of criminalizing us. And so that's why Michelle's sign is there. And just to Michelle's right, Michelle is now dead, but to her right is Rob Joyce, one of the gay men that was on our side, and he was a social worker. And Rob's still alive today. He's a big-time realtor in the West End, makes lots of money. And there's our march to City Hall, and this is in the early 80s as well. And we're wearing masks at that time because we felt that we could be arrested for just being a prostitute. So, and then in the early 90s, I met Dr. Becky Ross, and she had very much an interest in the sex trade issue. And we've had a long collaboration together. And I was telling Becky about these finds, and then so she got a research grant and hired me as a researcher. And we dug in the files and came up with all the evidence we needed. And we went to the city, and they tried to poo-poo that, they had done these awful things to our community, but we were ever vigilant. But trying to take on City Hall for anything takes forever. But I'm proud to say we managed to get reparation from the city. We had enough evidence, and we wanted that money returned in the form of a memorial. For all the sex workers, and especially trans sex workers, who went missing and were murdered after the West End, and the city agreed. And of course, we let them off the hook a bit. We didn't charge them interest, and they were lucky, because you can imagine back in that day and what that money would be worth today. But we're going to have the first ever sex workers memorial in the West End, and it's going to be unveiled in May, June, because the city, it's supposed to be there for May, but the city takes forever, so it might be June. And also, it's the first time ever we're going to get a civic apology, and that. And that fight was worth it. It may have created health problems for me, but I'm very, very happy to have continued fighting. And, now I see very much in our transsexual, transgender community, especially in Vancouver, there are many others that are have been fighting, and I've been working with them, and I just want to introduce them because they're over here too from Vancouver, and I want them to stand up. Aurelia, Dale Roberts, Josie, and of course my wonderful friend, my best friend, Velvet Steele. And together I'm sure Josie didn't know that when she met me that she would be dragged along into fighting this battle too about the sex trade, but I've always said they're intertwined for many of us from our generation. And so it's better times now for trans people, and I'm really happy to see that. I think sometimes we get one step forward and sometimes we go back a couple of steps. But I think if we keep, coming together in conferences like this and speak out, we have the first world ever trans chair in Dr. DeVore. That's amazing. And I think we should be so thankful for that. Because when we have people in powerful positions, we're going to make progress. And now we are making progress. I know in BC here, you can change your gender marker without having to submit yourself to a doctor, just on affirming that that's the gender that you're now presenting as, and that's very important. I think younger trans people are, they're able to get some pharmaceuticals to stop some of their hormones at a pre-puberty stage. That's great. We still need gender specialists in BC to perform the surgery here, because I don't think those people should have to go to Montreal or abroad and then have to, after that surgery, come back on a flight, and that's where they've been quite a distance and they're trying to heal. So I think that's another battle that we have to take on. And I just remember that let's keep connected. That is really the biggest thing that we need to always remember. We can be factionalized, I understand that, there's different groups, but at the end of the day, if we all just still reach out and support each other, I think that's what's going to make fundamental change in our society. I want to thank you very much for having me here today.